Long before the modern map of the United States was drawn, when vast lands stretched endlessly under the skies, there was a dream carried on the backs of those who traveled westward. That dream was the search for freedom, land, and the chance to build something out of nothing. Among the countless stories that shaped the history of America, one shines with raw courage, human sacrifice, and an unshakable spirit. It is the story of the Donner Party, a group of families who set out to build a new life, but whose journey turned into one of the most heartbreaking trials of survival in American history. In the spring of 1846, nearly 90 men, women, and children packed their wagons in Springfield, Illinois. They were filled with hope, leaving behind the familiar to chase a promise whispered across the nation, the fertile lands of California. They had read tales of endless farmland, golden sunlight, and opportunities beyond imagination. For many, this journey wasn't just about land, it was about destiny. Among them was George Donner, a respected farmer, 60 years old, leading the way with his brother Jacob. With their wives and children, they embodied everything the westward expansion symbolized: bravery, unity, and trust in God. At first, the journey was filled with laughter and hope. Children ran alongside wagons, women prepared meals by the fire, and men shared stories of the life awaiting them across the mountains. They followed the well-traveled Oregon Trail, believing they would make it to California before winter snow blocked the Sierra Nevada passes. But fate had other plans. A man named Lansford Hastings, eager to promote a shortcut he had never traveled himself, had published a guidebook claiming there was a faster route through the mountains. This so-called Hastings cutoff promised to save hundreds of miles, but no one truly knew what awaited them. Trusting the words in the book, the Donner Party made a decision that would seal their destiny. They left the safe path and followed Hastings's untested route. At first, the cutoff seemed manageable, but soon it revealed its true nature. The trail was rough, full of steep mountains, endless deserts, and thick forests. Progress slowed painfully. Wagons broke down, oxen grew exhausted, and tempers flared. Families began to quarrel. Weeks turned into months, and still, California was far ahead. Every day of delay brought winter closer. By the time they reached the Great Salt Lake Desert, their food was running low. Imagine the scene. Wagons dragging across a dry, endless wasteland, oxen collapsing under the burning sun, children crying out for water that wasn't there. Mothers tried to comfort them with empty promises, while fathers walked in silence, their hearts heavy with fear. They lost days in the desert, and many of their animals perished. Yet, still, they pushed forward, clinging to hope. Finally, by late October, they reached the Sierra Nevada mountains. The land before them was steep but passable, if only they had arrived a few weeks earlier. But nature was merciless. Snow began to fall, lightly at first, then in storms that buried the trails under several feet of white silence. The Donner Party was trapped. Their wagons could not move. Their animals died one by one in the freezing cold. Families built crude shelters out of fallen logs and canvas, huddling together against the bitter winds. At night, the mountains howled, and children shivered under thin blankets, asking their parents why they couldn't go home. The once cheerful journey had become a nightmare of hunger and despair. Days turned to weeks, and weeks turned to months. Food ran out completely. They boiled leather, chewed bark, and dug through snow in search of roots. Some families slaughtered what little remained of their livestock, but soon even that was gone. Men grew weaker, women prayed desperately, and children wasted away before their parents' eyes. Starvation clawed at their souls, and death began to creep silently into their camps. In December, a group of the strongest men and women decided to attempt the impossible. They would walk across the snow-covered mountains to find help. They carried little food, scraps of blankets, and a fierce determination to save their loved ones. For days they stumbled through blizzards, their feet bleeding, their bodies frozen, their eyes hollow with exhaustion. Some collapsed along the way, whispering their last prayers, never to rise again. But a handful survived and finally reached a settlement, breathless and broken, telling the world of the families trapped in the mountains. Rescue parties were formed, but the storms made every attempt dangerous. It took 4 separate rescue missions over the course of months to save the survivors. When rescuers arrived, the scenes they found were almost too terrible to describe. Wagons buried in snow, cabins filled with silence, and families reduced to shadows of their former selves. Parents had died with arms around their children. Brothers and sisters lay side by side, frozen where they had last huddled together. The rescuers carried out the living, barely alive, and buried the dead beneath the snow. Of the nearly 90 souls who had set out full of hope, only 48 survived. Their story shook the nation. Newspapers reported it with horror and pity, and for years afterward, the name, Donner Party, became a symbol of both tragedy and the relentless determination of pioneers who gambled everything for a dream. Yet within this darkness, there was also light. The survivors carried not only the scars of hunger and loss but also the memory of love, courage, and sacrifice. Mothers who gave their last crumbs of food to their children. Fathers who shielded their families from the cold until their own bodies gave out. Strangers who shared the little they had so that others might live. It was a story not just of suffering, but of humanity at its rawest, its weakest and strongest moments entwined. The Sierra Nevada mountains still stand silent, their peaks touched with snow, as if holding the memories of those who tried to cross them. Every winter, the winds sweep through the trees, echoing the cries of children, the prayers of mothers, and the footsteps of rescuers who risked everything to bring them home. The story of the Donner Party remains one of the most emotional chapters in the history of the states, a reminder of how fragile human life can be, and how unbreakable the human spirit truly is.